My name is Cindy McCline. I'm the Director for Continuous Improvement for the school district and the liaison for this group. Hi, come on in, CSI or DAC?
They want us to open the door.
Oh, no, that's a separate meeting. Okay, thank you. I can bring you the picture they're looking for. So DAC is going to be happening on the other side of that wall very soon, so it may get a little boisterous over there, so we might have to speak up a little bit, which should make fun for the recording. But as I was saying, I'm the staff liaison for the Continuous Systemic Improvement Committee. Very happy to see a lot of new faces. So we'll just start with some quick introductions, and then we have a phone conference with one of our board attorneys to talk about parliamentary procedure. So Julie, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Julie Holcomb. I'm an application support specialist in the professional development department. I am the recording secretary for this group. This is my third year. I have been with the district 26 years. I've been in staff development the entire time while I've been here.
My name is Jack Dunnigan. I am technically retired, although it doesn't feel like it. I spent all of my career in leadership training and development, starting with Native American tribes in the American Southwest, and then ultimately working in 24 countries around the world and helping bring new life to stagnant organizations. It's often work, but not always.
But exciting work,
It was,
like.
yeah.
That's great. Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Bill Ribble. I'm the mayor of Estero. I'm also a retiree from UPS, where I spent 35 years as a senior vice president of the organization, and this is my second year on this committee.
Good evening, I'm Jason Grabowski, and this is my second year on this committee.
My name is Mary Jo Potter. I'm the reading coach at South Fort Myers High School. My daughter was a Lee County student, just graduated from Alabama, and is now teaching high school at South Fort Myers, so that's pretty awesome for me. And this is, I think, about my fourth or fifth.
My name is Jamie Van Cleve, and I am the intervention specialist at Challenger Middle School. And I started last year, but this is still technically my first year.
Came in mid-year.
Yes.
My name is Dave Montrose. I'm the Performance and Quality Improvement Director at Catholic Charities in the Diocese of Venice. I was also a teacher for 9 years in the district.
Kathleen Morgan, Lee County School Board. I represent District 7, which is countywide.
Brian Resnick. I owned a company called Self-Insured Plans, sold it to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama last year. This is my second year, and I have 2 kids in the Lee County School District. One at Bonita Springs, or actually both of them this year at Bonita Springs High.
Hi, my name is Morgan. I'm a student. I go to KPI and I'm dual enrollment, and my counselor said I would be good in this, so.
Hi, we're glad to have you.
I'm Ryan McLean, live in Estero. I have 2 boys, both at Pinewoods Elementary. My wife's a kindergarten teacher there, and I'm one of the retirement plan providers for the school district.
Thank you.
I'm Rachel Akinga-Sarat, new. I work for a medical device company. I do medical safety, which in translation is quality and risk management.
Hi, I'm Warren Baucom. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Entrepreneurial Activities for the Lee County Economic Development Office. I've got a 4th grader at Edison Park Elementary, and I've got a 6th grader at Paul Arms Dunbar Middle School. I have been with the county for 15 years now, and prior to that I was in management and executive positions in the hospitality industry.
Terrific. Now I feel like a bad mom because I did not mention the fact that both of my children are Lee County graduates. And my son is also a Florida State graduate, and my daughter is a senior at FGCU and will soon be paying her own rent. So, and that's a raise. So I'm going to pop over here and pull up the phone number for our board attorney, and hopefully we will have a training here about parliamentary procedure. She's on the list.
He's new there too, so he was on the other side of the coach for a while. You'd like to sit on lunch, and.
Hello?
Hi, is this Mr. Myers?
Yes.
Hi, this is Cindy McClung with the Lee County School District. We have you on speakerphone.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you this evening?
Good, good. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, can you all hear? Yes. So you're with the
Okay.
Continuous Systemic Improvement Advisory Committee this evening, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to participate. And I understand I have about 15 minutes to cover all these topics that I want to delve into. Is that right? About 15 minutes?
About that, but take as much time as you need.
Okay, so so my background is in ethics and government in the sunshine, public records, and a little bit about, I'm also going to talk a little bit about parliamentary procedures. So let's start with the ethics code. So all of the members are governed by state ethics statutes, Chapter 112, Part 3. And essentially what it does is it prohibits people who sit on boards from having conflicts of interest. So if you have a conflict of interest, obviously it creates possible liability under state law. So the ones that are most likely to occur for people who sit on advisory boards, one is a voting conflict. So let's say that you have an item that comes up where you could personally benefit from the action taken by your committee, even if it's only a recommendation, because you don't make the final decisions, you're just making a recommendation. So if an item comes before the committee and you could personally benefit, or a family member could personally benefit, or your employer could personally benefit, then you're not allowed to vote on the item. So you have to abstain. And not only aren't you allowed to vote, you're really not supposed to participate in the discussion of the item either. So what you should do is if that were to come up, you should state on the record, I have a conflict here, I'm not going to participate, I'm not going to vote, and then you have to file a written memorandum with whoever takes your minutes. You should file a written memorandum with the person who actually takes the minutes. Now, if you feel uncomfortable about something and you don't have an actual conflict, but you feel that, something is creating a perception of a conflict, you also have the right to abstain. So if you don't feel good about a particular situation, you don't like the way it looks, you can abstain for that reason too. So unless you have a real conflict or a perception of a conflict, then any item that comes before your committee, you must vote on. Unless you leave the room. I mean, if you're out of the room, obviously you're not counting. But if you're in the room and you have no conflict, then you're required to vote under state law. So that's one area under the state ethics statute that's important for people who sit on boards. A second area is doing business with the agency. Obviously, the school district's a pretty big place. There may be contracting opportunities and things like that. As a general rule, you and your family should not, enter into contracts with the school district. There are some exceptions, and I don't really have enough time to go through the exceptions, but the rule of thumb is do not enter into contracts with the district. It's one thing if you work for a company that that actually has a contract with the district, that would be okay, as long as you don't have an ownership interest in it. But if you own the company, or a family member owns the company, or you have a material interest in the company, then you really shouldn't be doing business with the Lee County School District. Do business with other school districts, with county government, with municipal government, but stay away from doing business directly with the Lee County School District. So those are the two major areas that board members typically have to deal with in terms of the ethics statute. I don't know if people have questions or I should wait to the end, but if anyone has any questions, I'm more than willing to answer them. So that's area number one. It's kind of the general ethics rules. A second area has to do with something we call the Sunshine Law. And I don't know how familiar you are with that, but there's a rule in the state of Florida that if you sit on a public board, and that includes a committee like yours, 2 or more of you cannot talk about your committee's business outside of a public meeting. So if, let's say, 2 of you are friends and you play golf together, you go to church together, that's fine. You can converse with one another as long as you don't talk about something that's on your committee's agenda or something that could come before your committee's agenda in the future. So it's almost like you have to predict the sort of issues that may come up. So if it's not on the agenda or it's not anything that's likely to come on the agenda in the future, you can talk to each other. So you want to talk about your kids, you want to talk about the weather, you want to talk about what's going on in Washington. Just make sure that if you're going to have a conversation with each other outside of a public meeting, you don't talk about what's before your committee. And that includes communications, face-to-face, phone calls, emails. If you're on social media, you should not be interacting on social media about your committee's business. Like I said, you want to be on social media and comment about other people's posts that have nothing to do with your committee, that's fine. But just don't have any conversations or communications about your committee business. Okay? So you can have those discussions at a public meeting, that's fine. And the way that a public meeting is a meeting that's held, usually, it'll be in your headquarters in your administration building. The meeting has to be noticed and minutes have to be taken. So those are really the 3 most important things. For a meeting to be a public meeting, you have to take minutes, you have to notice it, and it's got to be in a public place. So if you decide to hold a meeting at a restaurant, that obviously is not a public place, so that would be a problem. If you decided to have a meeting, online where everybody would contribute online, that's not a public meeting either because not everybody has access to a computer. So you got to have a meeting in a public place, a location, and it usually has to be, it's got to be in one of your buildings, in Fort Myers. You couldn't hold a meeting, let's say, in another city. In most cases, that would not be a wise thing to do. So, like I say, you don't have to worry, the committee members themselves don't have to worry so much about noticing the meeting or taking minutes or anything like that, but just keep in mind that, any meeting that involves the committee, 2 or more members, we were talking about committee meeting, has to be open to the public, and that means the public has the right to attend these meetings, and in some situations they have the right to participate, and they may even have the right to, they can tape record the meeting, and, it's their meeting, it's really not your meeting. And whether people attend or not is not the point. We still have to notice the meeting, we've got to give the public reasonable notice. So for example, let's say you're having a meeting tonight, and let's say there's an item and you couldn't finish it up tonight, so you want to call a special meeting tomorrow at 6 o'clock, and let's say your meeting's over at 8 o'clock. That's not sufficient notice. You've got to give the public at least 24 hours notice to schedule a second, an emergency meeting. So that's the way the Sunshine Law works. So just, refrain from having discussions with one another outside of a public meeting if you're talking about your committee's business. Is that clear to everybody? That's the biggest, I would say, more issues go to the state attorney's office involving Sunshine Law violations than anything else. And in most cases, it's inadvertent. People don't mean it. And we're not saying you can't socialize with one another. We're not saying you can't talk to one another or go on Facebook and post or like each other's posts, but just make sure, it has nothing to do with your committee's business, because if it does, then you have potential problems under the Sunshine Law. Okay? So the next area is public records. So let me just spend a couple minutes talking about public records law. Because you're on this committee, you're going to get sent stuff. You may get things sent to you from the district. Maybe you'll get things sent to you from other people in the community who know you, and they're sending something to you because they know you're on a committee. Anything that you send or you receive in connection with your committee's business is a public record. And what that means is somebody has to keep that record. Somebody's got to retain that record. So if, let's say, a resident sends you an email and it's just sent to you directly, one committee member, you should keep that record, or you should send it to whoever takes your minutes. You should see to it that a copy of that record is kept by the school district, because if it's not kept by the district, then you have to retain it. And if you don't retain it and somebody makes a public records request for that record, that's potential liability to the school district and possibly to you personally. So if you send something, from your, whether it's a computer or a work computer, and it has anything to do with your committee's business, that is a public record. And under the public records law, those things have to be kept by somebody. And it doesn't matter whether it comes from a work computer, a home computer, or it comes from your cell phone. It's really content that matters. So if the content has anything to do with, the committee's business, then we've got to make sure that those records are kept somehow. And I don't think you want to be responsible for your records, so we've got to figure out a way to forward those records to somebody in the district who can keep track of them. Because if you don't turn over a public record, you're violating state law, just like the Sunshine Law. If you have a meeting outside the Sunshine Law, you're violating state law. And in both cases, those could be criminal acts. And not only can they be criminal, you can also be sued personally, and the district can be sued. So Sunshine Law is one part of it. Public records is the second part. So with public records, even something like if you kept a calendar and your calendar, you indicated committee meeting 6 p.m. If somebody asked to see your calendar, they could see that portion of the calendar where you're mentioning your committee meeting, because that's considered public business. Now, the rest of the calendar, let's say you had a noon doctor's appointment, or you had a 10 o'clock yoga class or something like that, that we don't have to turn over, but we do have to turn over the portion of the record that deals with, your committee's business. Okay? So the public records law, is something that a lot of governments are trained a lot on, because it's so easy to make mistakes and not keep copies of records. And there are people who go around the state who make all of these public records requests. I guarantee you, in the school district, and the administration is probably more aware of this than the school board members than you might be, but there are lots of public records requests floating around. And you know what? People don't have to have a motive. Their motive could be to see the school district. They don't have to put their requests in writing. All we know is if they make a request for records, and those records are not exempt under Florida law, we've got to turn them over. And we've got to turn them over quickly. We just can't, we can't withhold records because we're busy doing other things. When we get a public records request, we have to promptly, respond to the request and say, yes, we received your request, and then we will move as quickly as we can to make those records available. Now, it depends on what they're asking. And if somebody wants to see your agenda for your meeting tonight, it shouldn't take a long time, to produce that. On the other hand, if they wanted to see a report, or they wanted to see proposals that have been submitted, to a committee or something like that, it might take us a little bit longer to assemble records. But understand, we can't question why somebody wants the records. We can't force the requester to identify himself or herself. We just have to make the records available, as quickly as possible. Okay? So let me turn it over to Robert,
public records,
and a little bit about parts. Unless somebody does anyone have a question about anything?
Yeah, I just want to get a clarification. It was my understanding that we have a legal right to charge the person for the copies that they're requesting. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a good question. Two parts. One is we can charge the person copies for the copies they're requesting. We can even ask them them for a deposit, and if they're not willing to give us the deposit, we don't have to turn over the records. The public records law is twofold. One is somebody wants the records, another is they just want to inspect the records. So let's say somebody says, you know what, I don't want these records, I just want to look at them. We have to make those records available for inspection. And what that means is we probably have to have a staff person there present when the person's going through the records to make sure this person's not altering a file or a record. So public records is two parts, copying and inspection. So we can charge them for copying. We can also charge them for assembling the records. Let's say it's a request that requires staff to spend a good amount of time assembling or collecting the records. We can say it took us 3 hours to assemble the records at such and such rate per hour, and we can say if you don't want to pay that, we don't have to turn over the records. And that happens a lot. I mean, if it's a simple request for, like I say, your minutes, whether we want to charge them for 3 pages, that's really up to the district. But if somebody wants 200 pages worth of records and it took staff 4 hours to compile the request, we can say this is what it's going to cost you. If you want these records, this is what you have to pay us in order to get the records. And they might say, you know what, I don't want the records, I just want to come in and look at them. And then we have to make, we've got to make those records available for inspection purposes only.
Yeah, in most cases, it's just a nuisance claim, and I just wanted to bring that up because if you just submit and let these people come in and get your documents that you're paying a clerk and the ink and the paper and everything else, after a while it gets pretty expensive. So most people are just doing it for harassment. They're not doing it because they want the information.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. The thing is, I'm sure you have people who make lots of public records requests, and staff spends a lot of time compiling and responding to these requests. And this is not unique to Lee County. This is across the state of Florida. We represent a lot of municipalities, and they're bogged down in public records requests. But we have to be responsive, because if we're not, they can go into court and they can collect attorney's fees and costs, and we don't want to be in that position. Now, the other thing about it is, when someone makes a request for the records, somebody has to go through them, whether it's legal or the clerk's office or somebody, in a department, to make sure that what we're turning over, in fact, is a public record. Because, for example, we can't turn over somebody's social security number, or we can't turn over somebody's bank account information, or we can't turn over, certain people have restricted home addresses and things like that. There's certain student records, obviously, that we can't turn over. So if we turn over records that aren't public, we could be sued by that party for breaching their confidentiality. So that's why it's always important to have somebody review the records request before we actually release the records. Okay?
Attorney Myers, I have a question. My name is Crystal Ginyard. I'm an associate junior attorney at my firm. You had made mention about placing anything on your calendar could be subject to the public records law. So I wanted to just clarify, if I'm placing something on my calendar, is the attorney-client privilege going to be afforded if somebody needs to look through that?
Well, the first thing is, if someone makes a request for a public record, if it's a request for your record, you go through it and you say, this is confidential, this is exempt, this is not a public record. And then the part of the calendar that is in fact dealing with committee business, you would have to turn over. So like I say, your 6 p.m. Committee meeting, that would be maybe the only entry that's a public record. Exactly. So you decide what's public and what's not. Now, if somebody didn't believe you, if they thought that you were trying to withhold information, then they could go into court and the judge could take a look at it and say, no, this you really need to turn over. But the first opportunity to go through your record it's on you. And if you say this is protected, we're pretty much going to go along with that, unless, like I say, we have reason to doubt you. But you go through the files and decide what's public and what's not public.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome. And any other questions about public records or sunshine? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Robert's rules. And, they're obviously, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it because I don't have much time. But it's important that we have a process that we follow, that is orderly that's fair, that's efficient, and that's where Robert's rules come in. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over each motion, but I guess it's really important to understand the role of the chair and the role of the members. And I guess the first thing is that the chair is, the person who essentially, controls the meeting. The chair opens the meeting, declares there's a quorum. Now, keep in mind, if there's not a quorum, unless your rules say otherwise, you could still meet, but you can't take any official action. But the chair will announce there's a quorum. The chair is supposed to preserve decorum and order. The chair is supposed to call to order any member who violates the procedures. The chair is supposed to identify people if they are out of order. Whether that be a member or a member of the public who shows up and starts speaking, the chair has to control the proceedings. And the members, you all have been appointed. You obviously take it very seriously, but what I've witnessed over the years is not every committee member is as committed maybe as they should be, and they're not always prepared. And I think the best thing a committee member can do is to be prepared, to read the agenda, to read the backup materials, to attend regularly. I mean, I realize other things happen in your lives, and you may have to miss a meeting every now and then, but regular attendance is critical. And, if we have a hard time making a quorum, the question is maybe we should look elsewhere for membership. But it's important, like I say, to be prepared. It's important for all the members to have a basic understanding of parliamentary procedure. The goal is to work together harmoniously as best you can. Obviously, it's not about consensus. You're entitled to have differences of opinion. But at the end of the day, the product that you're producing, the recommendation that you're making, hopefully you all buy into it. Now, like I say, a person can disagree or dissent, and that's fine. There's nothing that says everything has to be done unanimously. But it is helpful if all the committee kind of buys in, to the end result or the recommendation that's being made. So the way the process is supposed to work is it's through motions. I mean, action is taken, under Robert's rules by people making motions. And I think the first thing to understand about that is the chair recognizes who speaks. And what we can't have is two people speaking at the same time. And only one person is allowed to speak at a time, and that person cannot be interrupted. And it's the chair who recognizes that person. So if the chair doesn't recognize you, you're not allowed to speak. Now, why isn't the chair recognizing you? That's a different issue. But as a general rule, you're not supposed to speak until you're recognized by the chair. And you don't yield the floor to somebody else until you're done speaking. So the way the process works is, we're usually talking about, getting something in front of the body. And how do you do that? Well, very simply. I mean, someone makes a motion to move something, to the floor, or the chair can say, item number one, and you start discussing item number one. But if you want to take actual action, there has to be, some sort of formal statement, a motion that's made by a person, and there has to be a second. If there's no second, there can't be any discussion. So if somebody makes a motion and there is no second, there is no discussion about that. So the way it should work is a person makes a motion, there's a second, and then the chair allows for discussion. Okay? And at the end of discussion, after people have had an opportunity to speak, and preferably everybody has an opportunity to speak at least once. What we don't want is one person, monopolizing the discussion. And we can't force every person to speak on an item. If they don't want to speak, they don't want to speak. But going around the table 2 or 3 times and having people kind of just repeat themselves is of no value. It's not efficient. It doesn't create a whole lot of economy. And, you've got other things to do, and you want to keep your meetings, relatively short. And you want to take action whenever possible. So let's say you've had this item that, motion's been made, it's been seconded, there's been discussion. Then it's a good idea for the chair to repeat the motion so everybody understands what they are actually voting on. So that way there's no confusion. So the chair, will repeat the motion, and then, you know, a vote is taken. And that's the way most things proceed. It's got to be through some sort of motion, some sort of a second. There cannot be a discussion of any item unless there's a second. You know, I guess, so in addition to the basic, the introduction of what we call a primary motion, you know, so I move that, you know, such and such, be adopted. Like I say, it requires a second. That can be debated, you know, the motion. You can amend the motion, and then you have to vote, and usually it's just a majority vote. Here's something that I've seen a lot that comes up, and we got to be careful about it. What about the idea of amending a motion? So a motion's on the floor, there's a second, it's been discussed, and someone wants to make, another member wants to make what they call a friendly amendment. And you ask the maker of the motion, will you accept my friendly amendment? There is no such thing as a friendly amendment. If you make a motion, to amend and you get a second, then what you vote on is the amendment. You don't vote on the actual amendment that was initially before you. So this idea of friendly amendments don't exist. It's okay to amend motions, but it's not done through the friendly amendment process. Like I say, there are all sorts of action items involving motions. You can move to defer items, you can move to postpone items, you can move to request more information, you can move to suspend further discussion of particular items, you can move to end debate, you can move to adjourn the meeting. Like I say, it's all done through motions, and it's something that the chair is supposed to control. And you can you can ask the chair for a point of order. If you think that there's something that's improper, you can ask for a point of order, you recognize by the chair, and then you go from there. So I guess the idea that I'm trying to impart here about Robert's rules is the purpose is to keep it orderly, keep meetings flowing, respect each other by allowing one person to speak at a time, dispose of items through this practice of making motions, seconding them, discussing them, and voting on them. And if it fails, the item fails. If it passes, it passes. So that process keeps things moving. And to the extent to which you involve the public is usually going to be involved when you're discussing the item. Obviously, the public can't make motions because they don't sit on the committee. And if you kind of follow those general rules and you understand that you're all kind of working together, that you're trying to get your business done and you want to maintain order and decorum, following these basic rules is helpful and will allow for, everybody to feel that they're part of the process. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about Robert's rules. Any questions about Robert's rules or anything else that I've covered in my brief presentation? Silence is golden. Is that good?
No, you did good.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and good luck to all of you. And if you do have any questions, I guess the best way of reaching us is through, staff can contact Alan Gable, who's actually sitting here in my office listening to it. Alan serves as the acting school board attorney. So reach out to Alan and he'll communicate with me, and we'll answer any ethics questions or sunshine law, public records, or parliamentary procedure questions that you could have. Okay?
Thank you so much. We appreciate your taking time to be with us this evening.
Okay, sure thing. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. So some of you may not be familiar with, we had a board attorney and a staff attorney. Our board attorney resigned, and in the meantime, they're considering different ways of replacing that position. So in the meantime, we have a firm of attorneys that sort of take turns sitting in on board meetings and play tag team depending upon the needs. And so the gentleman that we were speaking with tonight was Mr. Myers, whose specialty lies in sunshine law and public meetings, basically. So it's kind of nice having different people that we can count on for different opinions, but keeping the name straight can sometimes be a challenge. So With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Morgan, who is our board member, for her board report, and we will go on with the meeting.
Okay, so first of all, I just want to remind everybody that these meetings are recorded, which is a change from our practice in the past. Welcome, thank you all for being here. Thank you to those who are new. Glad to have you here. I'm really here to listen to what you have to say, and if you have any questions you want to ask me, that's fine. But I'm not really here to participate in any way. I did give you all a sheet of paper that says Lee County School District 2019-20 by the numbers. Last night we approved the budget. And so we're ready to rock and roll for the 19-20 school year. Just the highlights, we have 11,574 employees, 95,000 students in traditional and charter schools. The budget we approved last night was for $1.6 billion. The sources are federal, state, and local. Local sources have been rising, state sources have been declining. And if you all have questions about this going forward, I'm happy to give you more information another time. FEFP is the basis on which our budget is created. In Florida, the legislature determines how much funding we will get for operating every year. We have no say over how much money we will get. What the state does do is they determine what our funding level will be, they decide how much they will pay, and then the rest comes off of the millage. And that's how the millage is created. So we have no say over how much money we get. Our say is over how we spend that money, the money that is not in categoricals. The millage levy is determined based on property values and required local, the rollback rate. So annually we are expected to determine what millage rate today would cover the amount of funds raised at the millage rate in the previous year. So essentially what happens is that rather than the school district being able to participate in increases in property values, the state essentially caps our ability to participate in rising property values. Discretionary funding is fixed. The millage rate is fixed for discretionary, and for capital it's fixed. So to the extent that there's any sort of average ongoing increase in local funding, it is in discretionary funding and in capital millage. And I think that's about all I want to say about the budget for today. But I'm happy to answer questions about the budget or anything else that you would like to ask me, since I am your County rep.
Obviously, budgets aren't going down. What was last year's? Just curious.
$1.5 billion. So the state came up with more money this year, but most of it is in categoricals. There was a big chunk of money. The state gave more money for mental health services for students this year. So they put $95 million in their budget for that, and we got a piece of that. So in terms of per pupil, gosh, I can't remember, it's actually gone up probably about 3%, significantly more increase than we've gotten in the past few years. But as I said, not much. I think maybe 1% of it is not categorical, which means 1% is what we have to give salary increases based off of. If you're trying to compete in today's marketplace, 1% increase in your operating budget, you're trying to pay staff, that's a problem. So I will say that this year, and you may hear if you have friends working in the schools, we've cut staff. We've raised some class sizes, particularly at the high school level. We have done restructuring in an effort to generate or to create a pool of money that we can use to pay increases to staff, because right now Lee County is not paying the starting salary that Collier County and Charlotte County are paying. So we are at a competitive disadvantage when it comes to hiring, particularly instructional staff. And I will say that there have been requests from some people in the community to go for millage increase to pay for salary increases for instructional staff, for all staff, which was done in surrounding counties, which is why they are in a position to pay more than we are paying. But we've just come off a half-cent sales tax increase to pay for all the capital money we need as a result of the growth in the school district. So, you know, that was a long-winded answer to your question. Sorry.
Any other questions from Mrs. Moore?
Hey, just for curiosity, we have the mayor of Estero here. What's the budget for Estero, just to compare size, what Estero versus?
Budget for Estero compared to the school district?
Yeah, and what's your budget?
It's peanuts, $28 million.
Okay, I mean, that just.
But we're government light, we only have 8 employees.
Yeah, I mean, that just puts it in perspective on how big of a budget it
It's
is.
a gigantic budget. Was the vote unanimous for the,
Yes, it was.
good, well, that's good.
In terms of size, we go back and forth with Lee Health as to who's the largest employer in the district or in the county. And right now, I think Lee Health has us beat, but not by much.
And I will say, we're right on track in terms of growth, because we're up about 1,300 students this year, and that's what we projected when we went out with the sales tax. So Lee County continues to grow.
How big a gap, like for a starting teacher, how big a gap is, I think we're about 48,500 or something like that.
We'll be thrilled with that.
Boy, I'd say, wow. No, I'm guessing it's around 41.5, 42, something like that.
41.5.
And what's Collier?
I don't know whether this is salary and benefits or just salary, but I'm told that they are paying $5,000 more than we are.
Which makes up for the gas money.
Well, that's true. For everybody who lives here and teaches there, yes.
Right, so before we get into electing the chairperson, I just want to talk a little bit about what the work of this committee is and establish some meeting norms and talk about our attendance policy. So I want to take you to our website. If you go, actually I will start at the very beginning so you know how to get there. So if you start out at leeschools.net, and choose leadership and school board, and then come down to advisory committee information. And you'll see some general information about all committees. And most of you found this because you applied online, so. And then if you come down here, there we are, continuous systemic improvement. So if you look here, excuse me, on this page, this tells you what we're all about. And also, this is where you go to find your dates and agendas. I wanted to highlight the mission, and it's right here in this, starting right here. So our mission shall be to systematically review components of the district's strategic plan for the purpose of providing input to the school board concerning the content and implementation of the plan. The committee shall determine which component of the plan to review after receiving a recommendation from the board member liaison and from the committee chair. So as we're thinking about this, how many of you have seen the district's strategic plan? People were here last year, I know, okay, a few others. Yes. When Dr. Atkins came in as superintendent, he had a grand vision called Vision 2020 that came in as our strategic plan. And that has developed as we got close to coming into 2020. We said, well, you know, we don't want to say Vision 2030 because that's poor vision. So we tweaked it a little bit, and we now have Envision 2030. Because we really are looking forward for the next 10 years. Where are we going to be? What is that world going to be like for our students? So when we first brought in Envision 2030, our kindergarten class that year will actually graduate in 2030. So it's how do we prepare for this group of children that are going to be graduating in 2030? And what does that look like? For me, it's gonna look like a beach. But, but for other people who will still be here, what's that work involved? So right now, we are in the middle of getting ready to have the board approve our yearly update. We have an annual update where we review the results from last year, do a few tweaks. So that board workshop, board briefing is actually on the 20th, a week from Friday. Backup materials are due on Friday. They'll be posted Friday afternoon, which means I'm gonna be working really hard over the next couple of days because my job is putting all that information together and putting the strategic plan into something that we can hopefully remember, understand, and explain to others. So those are my 3 goals around the strategic plan. The work of this committee will be to look at that and say, what is it that we want to make sure is going really well? What are some areas that we want to know more about? And any expertise that you have in specific areas, we're always looking for good input on that. So that's the work of this committee. If you scroll down a little bit further, you'll see the meeting date there, and you will see agendas and minutes. So if you go into school year 1920, 2 folders, one with agendas, which should only have this one in it, and won't have, go back one. And then that's where you will also find the minutes when Julie will post those. You can go in and look at them. Please review them before the next meeting so that when we come in, everybody's ready to vote on those. You'll see at the bottom, there's a list of board advisory committee recommendations, and we are going to talk about those toward the end of the meeting. Another role of this committee and of every board advisory committee is if you have specific recommendations that you want to make to the board, then that's where we get into the work that the attorney was discussing around presenting motions and voting. Now, he mentioned that you need a quorum to vote. In school board policy, we are not required to have a quorum. We are required to make a note of how many members are present when we make a recommendation, but we are not required to have a quorum according to policy. Excuse me. So let's talk about norms. And it's nice to have input on those. And in the past, sometimes we have just said, here are the norms that we recommend. But since we have half of our group is new membership this year, thought it'd be nice to go ahead and decide together what those norms should be. So if you have some recommendations for those, Julie will keep track of them for us. Ideas?
So last year, we had problems having it on, what day of the week was it last year? It was Mondays.
It was on Mondays.
And we found that, I think 2 or 3 of them were holidays, and so I think we were gonna avoid Monday this year.
Okay, and yes, we will talk about the dates. That's why we're here on a Wednesday.
Right, okay.
So, and we will talk about the dates in just a little bit.
Okay.
But in terms of meeting norms, I was referring more to how we work together as a group. For example, one of the ones that's important to me is that we honor your time, that we start on time and do our best to end on time. Sometimes that's difficult when we get into decisions, but are we in agreement that that is a norm that we want to use, starting on time, ending on time?
Yeah, I think a piece of that though was that we had to move the time from 5:30 to 6.
Yeah, we moved it from 6 to 5:30 and then back to 6.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Yes, and there's a little bit of history with that. The year before, we found that meetings kept going late. And so one of the committee members suggested that we start earlier so that we would have, if we did go late, we wouldn't be getting home quite as late. So year before last, we met from 5:30 to 7, which very frequently was 5:30 to 7:30. So last year they agreed, well, let's do that again, 5:30 to 7. But then when traffic started really getting busy, people were having trouble getting here at 5:30, so we moved it back to 6 to 7:30, which is where it is now. So we will talk about that when we talk about meeting times and dates. So one of the norms then will be start on time, do our darndest to end on time. Okay. You heard the attorney discuss how important it is for one person to speak at a time. So when we're speaking, what is a norm that we want to set around discussion?
Well, the chairman runs a meeting, the chairperson, right?
The chairperson does run the meeting.
Right.
So you need to respect the rules of order, okay? And even when you're respecting rules of order, sometimes discussions can get, and generally not in these meetings, quite honestly, but sometimes I'm sure you've all seen meetings where people don't always agree as they're discussing things, and sometimes the comments can be personal. So one norm that we could consider is that we respect everyone's comments and that we do not make personal attacks. You live with that one? Okay. All right, we're 2 for 2. Okay, any other norms?
I don't think we have a problem with any of this stuff. Last year, in fact, today, everyone was here at 6. So we got that fixed. We got off to a good start, though it was late.
I was late, but I was in another meeting. I was in the wrong room.
Well, you're an attorney, you can be late.
I'm so sorry.
But I thought the chairman that we had, Dr. Stark, I thought she did a great job and we all respected her.
And she is unable to be here tonight, but she is still on our committee, and she sends her regrets that she was unable to join us this evening, but she will be here at our next meeting. All right, so it sounds like everybody's ready to follow the rules, get started on time, be respectful of each other's opinions, and basically play nice, right? All right, then we're ready to go. So with that said, let's get back to our agenda. Attendance policy. Ms. Morgan, would you mind addressing that, the board attendance policy?
Let's see, so the board policy. Cindy.
Oh, it's okay, I can do it, I just thought you might want to talk about
But
it.
you correct me if I've got this wrong. So the board policy is that you must attend, and if you miss 3 meetings, unexcused, that you will be removed from the committee. You will simply receive notification of removal from the committee. You have a responsibility to notify Julie when you are unable to attend. And because we only meet once a month, and we meet generally for 7 or 8 months, 8 months, I guess. We only have 8 meetings. We are really, the board is really watching attendance carefully because we believe that the work that's being done in these committees is important work for the board. And if you are unable or unwilling to participate on a regular basis, then we would like to have somebody on the committee who is willing to assume that responsibility. I have to say, this is a great committee. I think people enjoy being part of it, and I don't think that we had much of a problem last year with attendance. So have I done my job?
With one minor edit there, last year, it changed from 3 unexcused absences to 3 absences in an absence.
That is correct.
So, and that was because even though, if it's an excused absence, we absolutely understand, but if you miss 3 out of 5 meetings, you've missed a big part of the work that's going on. Or, I'm sorry, 3 out of 8 meetings, you've missed a big part of the work that's going on. Thank you. All right, so with that, we're up, yes ma'am.
Note you have that. So I'll give you a perfect scenario. On occasion, I have to either go to Minnesota or Boston. And on occasion, in their mind, it's urgent. My husband would disagree, and so would the children. So on occasion, physically, I can't be here. The reality is, I can't do that.
Yes, and that's fine. You cannot vote through phone, but you can certainly attend the meeting. And that way you are not counted as absent. Perfect, thank you. Forgot about that, thank you. I thought you were pointing to the camera. This is the first time we've had that too. All right, so with that, I will open the floor for nominations for chairperson.
Does Dr. Stark have a problem with serving another year?
I have not specifically asked her, but I don't believe that she would have a problem with that. She was excited to return to the.
Well, I'd nominate her because, I mean, she did a great job last year. We won't skip a beat with the mission that we've been working on. So I'd make that motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, do we have any other nominations? All right, so we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Oh, she will be thrilled. That's what happens when you don't attend a meeting. Don't attend a meeting, you get a job, so that's a good reason to attend a meeting. I will contact her. She's in a class tonight, so I can't text her to find out, but I'm sure she will be okay with that. Okay, so now I'll open the floor for vice chair.
I'll nominate Brian Resnick.
You're really keeping it the same, aren't you?
Well, you asked me a question about the budget, so I gotta figure you want to be responsible, so.
All right. Any other nominations?
I'll second
No. Any other nominations? Okay, so we have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously, and the floor is now yours.
Oh, yeah, because she's not here. So I was gonna start it off by saying, last year we had a discussion about the camera, because that was, is it gonna happen, is it not gonna happen? And I remember some teachers being worried or fearful that they were gonna say things in here, or coming from an exercise class, I think it was, and they were fearful that that was gonna affect things in school. So obviously the school board, did they hear those things, and they still,
Yes,
they move
that was
forward?
brought up, and they chose not to reopen that discussion.
Okay. So I'm guessing there are a couple people that aren't here this year because of that, is that,
I don't know why people chose not to reapply, but it could be.
okay, all right, I just was curious, to see, because I don't remember hearing anything after we discussed it, and there was some pretty heated comments in here about it, so. All right, so I guess I wasn't even prepared because I was thinking that she was gonna be here. So what are we, let's see what we're doing.
So we are up to actually approval of the agenda, what's left of
Okay,
it.
so obviously half of the people here weren't on this committee last year. The people that were, did you guys read the minutes?
Yes.
I read them. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
A second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
I'll abstain. I missed that meeting, last meeting, so.
Okay. All right, and then, so that was meeting minutes. Now, that was pretty much it. Now it's public comment, huh?
Don't believe we have any members of
I
the
don't think
public
there's any
here.
public here. So before I get to public comment, obviously this is an exciting committee, but first year for the newbies, I'll call them. It's a little bit confusing for the first couple of meetings because I felt from my experience last year, and I was vice chair of the first meeting, and I felt like the first 2 or 3 meetings, I still didn't know what I was doing here. So Michelle does a great job of making everybody comfortable, and she really explains things really well. I'll be curious to see what we're gonna really focus on this year. And I think Michelle will probably, is she gonna, she hasn't even agreed to the position yet.
Guess what, you get to do that right now.
So we get to discuss what types of things we wanna, review.
And I'm just teasing you, I actually have a couple of recommendations.
Okay.
And then, and we can kind of go from there. But because we will have board approval, hopefully, of the new strategic plan before our next meeting, I thought the next meeting might be a good time to look at results from last year, look at the new format, so that you get comfortable knowing what it is, what the work is, and then at that time, really set priorities on what you want to look at further. The other item was that at the end of last year, one of the recommendations was around having a communications advisory committee. And we did meet with the communications director, Lauren Stillwell, and she wasn't sure that there was ongoing work for that, but she was really excited about the opportunity to get input from every committee, not just from this committee. And some of you may know that her job has now changed to chief of staff. However, right now she's doing both jobs because they're still in the process of hiring a communications director. But she would like to have an opportunity, or the new director have an opportunity, to come meet with each of the committees during one of the meetings. So that's something that we could look at for November or January, just to keep in mind for next time. Knowing that you haven't actually looked at the full plan yet, is there anyone come with any ideas of something you really wanted to explore this year?
One of the things that I hear in the community, and I don't know if it's something that we would be discussing at this level, but you talk to a lot of the teachers and they think that the pay for performance standards and guidelines seem to be unfair. And there's probably a lot of argument in it, and I happen to agree with the new way of pay. But I hear a lot of complaints, a lot of people, a lot of the teachers in the schools, I know at Benita Middle and Benita High, and they think it's not the fair way to pay. So I don't know if that's something that that is on the line that we could review.
That would directly impact one of our areas, which is around workforce success and also the retention of teachers. So if that's something people are interested in, we could speak with Dr. Pruitt, who presented last year, or possibly the Director of Compensation, Will Rothenberg, to talk about what the requirements are, because a lot of that we don't have control over. A lot of that is set by state and federal requirements, but I don't know all of those, and I'm sure they would be happy to explain that and talk about how they have come to the model that we do have right now. So keep that one in mind. That's certainly something we can ask them to work on.
Yeah, I agree with her on that. I thought she did an outstanding job last year in her presentation. I mean, she had our attention the whole time, but I agree that we ought to drill down on the salaries, and it sounds like it's a real issue.
Especially since we're comparing ourselves to Collier,
Right.
and we're down compared to Collier. The last thing you want is a Lee County resident going to another county and working.
Right, and Ms. Morgan just brought it up, there was the lack of funding compared to the other county schools. We'll look at it.
I think another area that I heard, I don't wanna, obviously anybody can jump in, but security, the security, we were presented last year by the head of security. He did a great job, but there's still some question on how how they're gonna follow through to make sure that remember the internal committees that they're created at each school, how that committee was gonna be tracked. Are they staying on task? Are they not staying on task? So I know security is a big deal. I don't know if we focus on that, or I think pay is probably a better option for us, for this committee to work on. We've got some seems like pretty smart people in here, so.
And the tracking of specific committees is part of their department improvement plan, and one of their key performance indicators of making sure that all of the drills that are complete, they're supposed to be completed are, that some of the things we won't be able to look at because some of it's confidential or just doesn't make sense to put out into the community. But for anything that they're comfortable sharing, we can certainly look at that. And specifically as it pertains to the strategic plan.
I guess a quick question on security, if that's brought back up here. If there's presentations given, is that excluded from, would some of that be excluded from Sunshine at that point?
Yeah,
I would assume some of that would be.
so Cindy, this came up at the board meeting. What would happen is that the individual who will present on safety and security will not will not respond to questions or provide information because this meeting is being recorded, if it would compromise security. Yeah. So it's not that they'll talk about it here and not record, it's that it's being recorded, and for that reason, they will not provide all of the information you may be seeking.
And some of the things they won't provide for anyone other than board members, and we'll have executive session around things that are deemed a security threat if the information would get out. And not just hardening, but also in terms of technological safety. So they're very careful about what they speak publicly.
I think another thing on retention compensation, I think it'd be a good idea there to gather maybe more than just our employee representatives or instructional staff, to have maybe a broader survey or something put out to like, what is actually really important. Feedback that I got from people with the pay raise they got with cutting a staff in my own household, you can keep your $400, give me my para back.
Yeah, I know.
So things like that, I think it's important that it's not always just the actual dollars, but it's what are we giving up for those dollars? I think it'd be kind of important if we're gonna take that on.
Other areas.
Yeah, without having seen the plan that's about to come out, I know that a lot of the focus that my office is doing, and then also some things in the first one, the growth that we're looking at going forward, how that impacts things like student assignment and the zones that are there. I know that the way the zones currently are have been this way for a while. And in my office, we're looking at commute times for when we have 1 million full-time residents, and that will obviously have 100 and something thousand students, and the transportation infrastructure, the county and other things. When you've got the zones that stretch from downtown Fort Myers all the way to the county line to the south.
Right.
And initially, for instance, my daughter was initially assigned to Three Oaks, and I live downtown by the Edison home. Those types of conversations, well, that's only going to not only get longer in time frame, but, it's just gonna add to the congestion, the mileage on the buses. So are we gonna look at any of those types of issues?
Well, there's a proximity plan that's being worked on. We could have someone come in and speak to that as well. We have a lot, I know you haven't seen the plan, but there are basically 5 major areas to the plan. The first one is increasing student achievement. And included in that, but brought out separately because of the importance, is kindergarten readiness and then college and career readiness. So those are the 3 that are really academically focused. Then we have workforce success, which is our internal workforce, so all that you've been talking about there. And then the last one is operational efficiency and effectiveness and really improving that. So those are the 5 big areas. And then there are many goals related to that at the division and department levels, and then action plans around all of those. So you'll have a chance to see those in more detail at our next meeting. And it's exciting to me because there's just so much. This district's huge. I mean, it's just huge.
I understand.
And then the other thing that is still in the works, but we want to have a rollout of the strategic plan to our community in a way that we've never done before. And we would like to involve our community, work with our community, our Lee Schools Foundation, and also with the Community Foundation, and tentatively roll it out through a half-day session at the Collaboratory, where we would bring in community members and we would have like little TED Talks about different pieces of the strategic plan. So that's something that I would really like to involve this group with if you're interested in, because I think that we could get some good perspectives from the variety of experiences that we have here. So that is tentatively March. I'm hoping to have a final date before our next meeting. So that's another way that we really want to involve our community in getting the word out about what it is that we do. Everybody's been to school, but that doesn't mean that you really know what school's about.
I'm really happy to hear about the workforce development or preparedness portion of that, and hopefully that will be a 2-way conversation, because it ties into the communication changes you've been talking about as well, because there's a lot of not only misinformation but misunderstanding from the business community as our county grows. We have new companies coming in, and people that are used to systems wherever they've come from, and explaining how things work here is a huge challenge. And I've always tried to advocate real strongly for the positives of the district's approach, because there's a lot of weaknesses to the other way up north, or around the state and all of north. And so I'd like to see some focus on that to those partners as well.
Any other ideas?
Cindy, I think last year, at the beginning of the year, we kind of reviewed all the recommendations that came out of the committee the prior year, and an update on where they stood and what action has been taken. I'd like to move that maybe we do that on this agenda item on the next meeting, maybe, so.
Move it to the next meeting instead of this one?
Oh, no,
Because right now it's on the agenda for
Okay,
tonight.
we're gonna do it, okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, I see it. So I do want to make sure we cover.
Yes, we
Especially for the
definitely
newer
do.
members, because that'll give them an idea of what the recommendations were.
Try to do a bit of reading, but didn't get all of it.
Yeah, it's hard when you come in for the first meeting and just try and soak it all in. It sounds like we have some really good ideas to think about for next time to really finalize where we want to put things. Meeting dates, we have tentatively reserved this room for the second Wednesday of the month. Because last year's group said we prefer Wednesdays, but any day but Monday will be fine. Hi, can we help you?
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
We have a dag meeting going.
Oh, right next door. So, if you'll pull up your calendars and look to see if those dates work. Actually, the very next one does not work for me, but I can get someone to cover for me, that's rather than move the meeting date, so if you'll pull those up, I'll pull up, dates.
Yom Kippur.
I can do whatever the group decides, however, Tuesdays and Thursdays are preferable. It's up to them. I can make it work.
I think we had, one of the things was Wednesday seemed to be, it was either Mondays, Tuesdays, or, and it seemed like Wednesday always worked the best. Now Wednesday, I don't know, if Wednesday the 9th of October is Yom Kippur, I don't know if that's something that you want.
That's the second. Okay, well that, we probably should move that, not only because of this group, but also for public, if anyone wanted to attend.
Right, so that would be probably, you move it to probably the 16th, Wednesday the 16th.
Okay, let me see if there's anything tentatively reserved on the CSDC calendar for that day. DAC on the 16th. Well, DAC's tonight, and we're still able to, unless they get every room reserved, which is possible.
I'm only seeing report, at least right now.
But we'll check on that, and if not, we'll send out a couple of other options.
And then following the same religion, I just went, April 8th is Passover. Seems like second Wednesday, isn't it?
And the other thing we have to look for is, there's only one set of recording equipment, so if another committee is meeting on the same night, we can't meet on the same night unless we meet in the boardroom, which is not particularly conducive to group work. And DAC is so large, they don't really have a choice, and then they break out into other rooms. So the April 8th and October 16th. Okay, we'll look for additional nights for that, or further dates.
October 9th.
It was October 9th was the bad day.
So move it.
October 9th and April 8th, right?
16th was the alternate, yeah.
Yeah.
And then April would be the 8th, moving it to tax day, the 15th, but I don't think we care about that.
It would make sense to say the third Wednesday every month.
An extension.
We could look at the third Wednesday, but there may already be a group there. But let us, tomorrow we can check with the board secretary and find out what dates others have set. If there is not already a third Wednesday, we'll look at that, since it seems like we'll need to move 2 or 3. Otherwise, we'll look for alternate dates for those.
And it's no meeting in December?
Correct.
So November would be the 20th?
No, 13th.
The second,
Oh,
13th.
okay,
Right.
13th, okay.
So October 9th is the
October 9th was the one that we need to change, and then April 8th, we need to change.
You said no December?
No December,
So hold off on October, we'll tell us, okay, in October?
yes.
Okay. And November 13th.
And the last meeting will be in May.
Yes. And again, we'll send those out
You
as
send out
soon as we
the
get,
dates,
mhm.
okay.
Yeah, just as soon as we get confirmation on those. Yes, I'm gonna go back to our website, and on that same page where it said leadership and advisory committee information, down at the bottom, it has board advisory recommendations. So if we go to 1819, this is gonna show the recommendations that were made last year. And they're all from all the different committees are there, so I'm gonna find ours. They are in alpha order, so at least we can find this. Okay, so last year in October, we recommended that liaisons be assigned a 2-year term, that board member liaisons be assigned a 2-year term. The board did discuss that. They felt that that was fine if the person wanted to have 2 years, that they would have first option of staying with their committee for a second year. Some board members felt that they wanted more opportunity to learn about different committees and felt like maybe they didn't want 2 full years, but they do have that option, was what their final choice or final decision was. The second recommendation was in March. We recommended a timeline be developed for rolling out a standardized, consistent program for social emotional learning throughout the district. And that is being worked on by Chuck Bradley, who is our Director of Positive Prevention. So we will ask for a follow-up on that as the school year gets started and see where that is right now, but I know that he's working on that. The other one from that same meeting was that the committee recommended that the link to resources provided by the student engagement team, which is currently available on the district website, be added to individual school website templates. And they did that basically overnight. So if you go into your school's website, you'll see this list of links, and there's one on there because there's just so much available related to student mental health and suicide prevention, and just a lot of really good information there. And Lori Brooks and Chuck Bradley made a presentation, and this recommendation came out of that presentation. The next one, CSI Advisory Committee recommends that Board Advisory Committee meetings not be televised. That, as you can see, that didn't happen. So, yeah, the board chose not to reopen that discussion.
That was not a 7-0,
That was not?
a 7-0 decision.
No, it was not. It was not a 7-0 decision. And the next one, a recommendation was that the board create a communication advisory committee for input regarding district communication plans, website improvements, and a standardized calendar and website platform. And we discussed that earlier, that Lauren Stillwell definitely wants to gather input from all of the different committees and felt that it would be more useful for them to go and meet with everybody rather than have one committee. So they will be doing that this year. I believe that was our last one. That was the last one from CSI. So as you can see, there are a variety of different topics that were addressed by recommendations. They go into a spreadsheet that's on Google, and part of my job is to check that every week to see what new ones have been added and to make sure that, that the recommendation gets to the right people. So for example, when it was about the Communications Advisory Committee, went and met with Lauren Stillwell and said, you know, here's the recommendation, how do you want to handle it going forward? She spoke with Dr. Atkins about it, then she brings the information back, and then it goes into here as to what's being done. So you can always look on here, get the latest information. Any questions about any of the recommendations or that process? All right. All right, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay, is there anything else for the good of the order? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed to adjourn? All in favor?
And we are early, yay.